Hello and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. The first hour you can see on Rumble, Kick, and various other places. After that, you have to come across to either WarrenThornton.com or come to Patreon, type in Warren Thornton, and you can become a member. And of course, there are 5 breakfast shows for you to talk about, subscriber shows, every single day of the working week, Monday to Friday, and of course, we have 6 news shows for you, apart from Saturday, and of course, the Sunday night is 7 p.m. The rest of the shows are 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And you, of course, it's interactive, so you get to talk about it, which we think is really, really important. I am joined, as always, on Tuesday, Tweedy Tuesday, by James Tweedy from Sputnik, wonderful raconteur, author, and journalist. James, how are you this evening? Are you well?
I'm good, thanks, Warren. How are you?
Absolutely fab, and it's absolutely great to have you with us. We are going to tonight. We're going to have a good look at the map of how bad things are going in Ukraine, because of course nobody's really talking about that, and that's something that we do need to talk about. And of course, we've got Davos, we've got Trump talking tomorrow, we've got the Chinese, we've got oligarchs, we've got Lavrov, Douglas McGregor. And Newland, von der Crazy, and all the rest of them. I suppose there is only one place we can really start. And this is the problem that we have. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It is something that we put forward a long time ago, James, that if you were not going to literally talk to the Russians, there was going to be a bit of a problem, because it was going to leave you out in the cold, and you eventually were going to be the dinner or the main course, as it were. Do you see that as happening? Because the Greenland is Trump wants it. Has he gone in over aggressive and getting the EU to turn around and go, okay, you can sort of annex it with our help and everything else? Or is he, or as I believe he is absolutely determined to take Greenland?
I think with Greenland, the objection he made was that Russian and Chinese ships are sailing near there or something, and it's nonsense, really. But
yes,
but I think what he's trying to say is that he wants the European Union to cut off the Arctic Sea route, or the Northeast Passage, which is a shorter sea route from places like China and Korea and Japan to Europe, if you sail round the north coast of Russia, so you need icebreakers to keep that open. But Russia has these fleets of icebreakers, including nuclear powered ones. Like, they're much bigger and more powerful than anything other countries have, so they can keep that route open year round, you see. So they're okay. And then when you come out, you go in around, the Russian Far East through the Bering Strait near Alaska, and then you come out again into the Atlantic. So that's the way in from the Pacific, and you come out again into the Atlantic, down the Norwegian coast, and in between Iceland and the Faroe Islands, or the Faroe Islands and Norway and Denmark and so on, and then out into the North Atlantic past Britain or down the English Channel, if you like, and to the ports of London. And so on, right? So this is the thing. So I think I think that's what he's trying to say cryptically. He wants them to cut it off. You see, and then there's this whole thing. I mean, everyone's laughing at all the other NATO countries for sending. They say they're sending troops there, and they're sending like a handful. They're sending like a dozen or 6 or something, right? But what else can you do in Greenland? I mean, where are the roads? There it is. Where are all the roads and the railways that you need to keep a large military force supplied up there?
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, and it's freezing cold, so you need huge amounts of fuel just to keep warm, and probably a lot of extra more food than you'd normally eat, and things like that, and special supplies. And so how do you, unless you're going to go to one of the, the actual city, towns in the south there, and just stay there, then how exactly are you occupying Greenland? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, exactly that. The route we're talking about here, I mean, is obviously across the top there, and then down through the Straits of Iceland, or around the Iceland area. This is a corral job, isn't it, James Tweedy?
Well, the US has been working up to this kind of thing of blocking off seaways all over the world. So this is like for years, for decades, they've been messing around in the South China Sea, where they don't. There's a lot of there are 6 countries with conflicting territorial claims down there, and the USA isn't one of them, but the US decides to put its nose into it. And that's, of course, that's part of the route you sail from China to, I know, Iran or Saudi Arabia and back again to get oil. And you have to go through 1 or 2 or 3 choke points. So you've got to go between Papua New Guinea and Australia, or between Indonesia and the Philippines, through Indonesia there, basically, through the Indonesian archipelago, or past Malaysia there. And they're all narrow seaways. And
now, when we talk about that, James, we're talking about we're talking about these chains, aren't we? That they're trying to put China in, and one of them is Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, and then the second one sort of incorporates from Japan to the Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore way, up through Malaysia.
So right. You're going to make it very difficult. I mean, even if you sail out into the Philippine Sea, assuming you can get through the Kuril Islands there that run all the way down to Taiwan, that belong, that's where Okinawa is, full of US bases, right? And then where are you going to go from there? I mean, you're going to sail all the way around Australia to get into the Indian Ocean. It's a long way, right?
It is, yeah.
Right, and then you've got the point that China is exporting goods especially to Europe, and it wants to carry those goods by the shortest route because it's cheaper, and that current route, as well as being vulnerable, is longer than the Northern Sea route. So anyway, the US has been playing this game, let's cut off those. China is the main trade competitor to the US. Let's cut off all its sea routes, or put ourselves in a position where we can do and use that as leverage. And then this Northeast Passage kind of messes it up for them. I mean, you could say, why don't they just, build a big base right on the tip of Alaska there, and then try and harass the Chinese up there. But then on the other side, you've got Russia, and Russia will say, well, no, they're just sailing through our territorial waters there, and we haven't got a problem with China. So, they're sailing in that 1 mile of sea between the 2 islands. There's 2 islands that do the same name, and one belongs to Russia and one belongs to the USA, right?
That's correct. Yep. Yeah. Well, now what we have here is a bit of a problem, don't we, James? Because Greenland at the moment, and now it does have an American, but people call it an American base, but it's not really an American base. There's only like 150 men on there, and it's more of a radar listening station than it is actually a base.
Yeah, it used to be an air base, but it's been downgraded.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it might be an early warning radar station.
Yes, it's a Jew.
And
One
then
of the ones that it used to be one of the Jew thing, didn't it? The what they call the Jew line, the distant early warning.
Right. Okay. So, what exactly does the US need up there, and what can it really maintain? Does it want to start putting a whole and why does it need to do what it's doing now instead of just negotiating quietly with Denmark? So we'd like to, expand the base there and things like that, and the base used to be called Thule or Thula.
Yeah.
And now it's called something else,
Yes, something like Puffnick or something along those lines. But they've also, remember that they did a deal with Sweden to build a naval base there. If they really want to stop or stop anybody going through those coastal waters, then of course they're talking they'd have to put a base in Greenland. That brings up a problem, doesn't it? Because how long before they turn around, the Americans turn around and say, we want to annex Iceland because Iceland is the perfect thing. Now, one thing I would say about this, which is very, very, how can I put this, relevant to this, is they're already put men, the European Union and America, all starting trying to cut off this place, this area. They use this as a base in Gotland in the Baltic Sea. We're going to get more and more of. I mean, this is just the same thing being replayed, isn't it? I mean, Iceland would be the perfect thing, wouldn't it? Would that be in danger at some point from the Americans?
I think Iceland is a member. Is Iceland a member of NATO? I think it might be. Yeah. Iceland is green. You can claim Greenland as a colony of Denmark because it is, right? And the Greenlanders don't really consider themselves very Danish, but they, so the US could claim that it's liberating Greenland from, it's decolonizing it by colonizing it. You see, but Iceland has been independent for a long time. It was founded by people who were a very small population of people who were.
I mean, Iceland's been part of NATO since NATO was formed in 1949.
Right. Okay. Iceland is a country that was founded by people who were outlaws from Norway in the Viking.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. And they were always a little bit. They went there so that no one would lord it over them, and they never had a king. But then I think they became part of the Danish Empire, which dominated Scandinavia for a while. But it won independence again. But the Faroes and the Faroe Islands and Greenland are still colonies of Denmark. Okay, so you can argue. See, it's easier to argue it politically in the case of Greenland. And again, why would they? It goes back to the point I made earlier. Why would you need to? Why don't you just ask them and offer them a huge amount of money? What would be a huge amount of money for a country with a small population? Like 55,000 in Greenland or 300,000 in Iceland, right? Offer them money to, so that you can have a base there and you can basically do what you want and they won't object. Isn't that easier than doing something that might potentially cause NATO to break up? You know what I mean? It's going to strengthen the popular calls for countries to leave NATO, isn't it? Because the US is now bullying all the other NATO countries.
Yeah. Here's the thing then that we need to talk about now, because of course, Mark Rutte's going to be meeting Donald Trump. I mean, he's just an employee of America, isn't he, at this point, with NATO, the head of NATO? I mean, he just does exactly what the Americans tell him to do, doesn't he?
The
He loves,
officer,
he loves
the
daddy.
general secretary is not the one in charge of NATO.
Yeah.
The one who's in charge is the senior general, the commander of NATO. I can't remember what the name is. It's always a US officer.
Yes.
And then the second in command has almost always been British or German or French, I think. No, they're not French, because the French have never really been involved that closely, but British or German, most of them. And the Secretary General is a figurehead. He's just a spokesman, really. So there you go.
So how badly, in your estimation, James, does this damage NATO? Because for me, this pretty much makes NATO pretty obsolete, because the Americans just do. I mean, this NATO is just an arm of America to do whatever the Americans want to do, and nobody's going to say anything different. I mean, everybody came out and went, "Oh no, it's part of Greenland. You can't have Greenland. This, that, and the other." First of all, they were all asleep at the wheel. Well, they could have held a referendum in Greenland. Greenland turned around and go, "We don't want to be part of America, blah, blah, blah. We don't want American bases here." And the referendum then makes it very difficult for America to walk in, doesn't it? If the whole body of Greenland turns around and says, "No, we don't want it."
Yes and no. I mean, they could fight a kind of guerrilla war in Greenland just by sort of, turning off the heating in whatever building the US troops are sleeping in, or something like that. It wouldn't necessarily kill them, but they would wake up and be very chilly in the morning,
A couple of US
and the pipes
popsicles.
would all be frozen, and they wouldn't be able to use the toilet or have, wash their faces. And things like that. There's all sorts of little things you could do. It's a very difficult place to basically keep an army. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to really conquer it militarily.
Be very cold
against a major force. The problem I think the main problem this has with NATO is in popular politics, because there are in many of the NATO member states, there are significant parties with significant amount of support, who want to leave NATO or want to reduce involvement in NATO. And France has always been kind of, it's part of NATO. I think it's part of the NATO command now. It does not allow bases but it doesn't allow bases of other NATO countries like the US on its territory. And for a long time, although it was a member of NATO, its troops were not under the NATO command. The NATO commander could not order French units to do, French aircraft to take off and intercept something, or French brigades or divisions to march march here and fight a battle and so forth, right? Because they weren't into that. De Gaulle was, Charles de Gaulle, when he was president, that was when they broke with NATO like that.
He was the one. Charles de Gaulle was the one who turned around and said, "Never underestimate." Or I'm paraphrasing here. Never underestimate the stupidity of the Americans.
Okay, they probably, they've got their own nuclear deterrent, and that does kind of make you fairly secure. And you don't necessarily want to get into follow another country off the cliff, basically, into nuclear war with Russia. I suppose there's probably a suspicion that they might, if it ever got to that, they might declare neutrality and pull out. And in fact, any of the countries could do that if it came to the crunch. And then you've got the governments of Hungary and Slovakia, and the new government in the Czech Republic, who are also, they're all a bit iffy about. They think that Ukraine can't win the war with Russia, and they want the thing to end. They've cut off support, and they don't want, they want the thing to end as soon as possible, and they're against sanctions on Russia, which are harming their economy. And there's the thing: we're already in this situation where all the European countries are suffering economically because they did what the US demanded and cut off their supplies of gas and oil and things from Russia. right?
Yeah.
They're all suffering because of that, because of US foreign policy, you know, in Ukraine. And now what? Now the US is going to take, you know, quite a sizable chunk of territory, even if it's all ice, from one of the NATO countries, and there might not be anything they can do about it. Or if they, you know, and then if they do, I mean, what they can do about it is start a trade war with the US, or just, you know, rage quit and leave NATO. You
They
know, in
sent
which
some
case,
troops, James. They sent some
hmm?
troops. I mean, you had Germany send 15 troops. Britain have sent
Yes,
one. Norway sent two. The Germans and the Norwegians are now back at home once Trump turned around and said, I'm going to put tariffs on you. Suddenly
yeah,
they started going back home. I mean, we're just talking about a complete bunch of lemons at the moment, aren't we? I mean, they haven't got any real power. I
yeah,
mean, let's get that picture back up. So, I mean, what we're talking about here, James, is because they've been funding this war for the last 4 years, they're stony broke. They keep wanting to pinch the Russian assets, and they're going to have another go at it on
yeah,
February the 2nd. Um, so they've got no money to be able to throw at anything. They've got
yeah,
no weapons because they've given them all to Ukraine. I mean, they couldn't stop it if they wanted to, could they?
yeah. Especially Denmark. Denmark in particular
Yes,
gave a
they're
huge
all
amount.
in, aren't they? I mean, Fredrickson, and the Zelensky family have all had photographs together.
Well, they gave a lot of their arms to Ukraine. They gave stuff that they'd ordered from France, some self-propelled howitzers, you know,
Yeah,
Caesar. They're called the Caesar howitzer. They'd ordered them, and and they got the French to deliver them to Ukraine instead of to Denmark. They'd never actually had them, and they sent quite a lot of other stuff for a small country with, you know, like 6 million people, right?
yeah,
And so the joke's on them, hey, ha ha. But I mean, the one thing that they could do that Donald Trump really wouldn't like is say, well, we're not going to buy any more arms from you like we agreed to from the US
yeah.
companies. And we're not going to send them to Ukraine. Um, you know, and now we're going to be the ones that pull the rug out from under Ukraine, not you. Ha ha. And what are
Yeah.
you going to, do that prematurely so that your negotiating position with the Russians gets worse or something? They could do that.
That's
Whether they will or not is another thing, because
Well, let's have a look at that then, James, because you're talking about the rug pull here. And I think, yeah, you should do it, but the likelihood of that happening is absolutely zero because von der Leyen, Kaya Kallis can't mention Greenland and what's happening and, sovereign state of Greenland and everything else without then having a Russia-China meltdown or Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, for the last 5 years,
yes,
all they talked about as they've destroyed their own economies, as everything has gone completely to pot in Europe, is talk about Russia, where really they didn't have it. At the end of the day, how can I put this? Ukraine isn't an EU country; it's not a NATO country. Their Russophobia has been their utter undoing, hasn't it? Here,
well, yeah. I mean, I think they're trying to butter up the US by saying that sort of stuff. Oh yeah, but they also don't. I mean, I suppose they've painted them. That you're right. They have painted themselves into a corner by, bigging up the threat from, exaggerating the threat from Russia or whatever problem they have with China. And they can't really backtrack on that so easily now.
yeah,
And it is sort of, and then they've also been kind of playing up the relationship with the US, and now they have to say the US is wrong, and they will try and say it's about Donald Trump as an individual or something like that,
yeah,
but it's not. And let's say if Trump really did, if the US really did annex Greenland, invade and annex Greenland under Donald Trump, and the next president was, from the Democratic Party, do you think they would reverse that? I don't think they would.
No, I don't think they would either. It does seem quite staggering. I mean, the only one who's really talking it up, of talking real opposition is Macron, and of course Trump turned around and said he's going to be gone shortly. But this is a guy who turned up at the World Economic Forum with sunglasses on, because it rather looks like his missus has had a second go at what she started on the plane. I mean, he's a dead man walking. Nobody's going to be listening to him. I mean, they've all. Oh. The trouble is, Macron's made himself look stupid. Merz has talked a fantastic game, and then about the aggression and this, that, and the other, and everything else. But the problem that they've got with this, isn't it, is that Merz is now turned into Joan Rivers. He's like, "Can we talk?" Everybody's trying to talk about getting someone to go forward, and negotiate with the Russians. Because finally they've woken up that, hang on a minute here, America are doing this. Maybe somebody should be talking to the Russians, because by next year they're going to be buying 50% of their LNG from America, and of course all their weapons are going to come from America. So I mean, when you talk about painting yourself into a corner, they've done a cracking job of this, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean. Europe isn't completely dependent on the US for arms supplies, but the nature of NATO is that they standardize on certainly calibers of ammunition and things like that. And
155 millimeter shells,
yeah, things like that, exactly. 5.5, 6 millimeter rifle cartridges and all that. And on certain other things, they do standardize on other things. And I think a great example is there was this what was it, the deal of the century back in the 60s, where Lockheed Martin sold a lot of countries by bribing their defense ministers. Their F-104 Starfighter, and it was a terrible aircraft, really. It was very dangerous aircraft. Used to crash all the time. Canada bought a lot, and half of them crashed. Literally,
they did. Yes,
half of them were lost in accidents. And then they've done the same thing. Lockheed, the same company, Lockheed has done the same thing with this F-35, which is incredibly expensive
and still pretty bad. I mean, I remember those things. They were called mounted. The Canadians had a great name for them. They used to call them mountain magnets, James. So because they used to crash so often.
Yeah. The German joke was that if you bought one, if you wanted one, you just had to buy some land and wait for a plane to crash on it. Anyway, that's the thing. So they've gone along with all that, and they've signed up to those contracts. They're buying these white elephant aircraft, and they could have bought aircraft from Dassault, or they could have bought Eurofighter Typhoons, or Saab Gripens, or something like that, or they could have all got together and developed something similar to the F-35 if they wanted that, but they didn't. They bought it from the US. So okay, they could bite the bullet on that and say, well, we're not going to buy these things, or we're going to, we're going to cancel the contracts, or we're going to buy them, but we're not going to buy any more after that, and so forth. But they're also, at the same time, they're all panicking because, because of the war in Ukraine, and this realization that they didn't have enough stuff to fight a war for more than a couple of weeks, enough stockpiled ammunition. And then there's a war going on in Ukraine which has lasted almost 4 years now, where Russia is doing well because Russia had a stockpile of millions or tens of millions of artillery shells and all sorts of other stuff,
Yeah.
And you cannot have too much.
And got on
you literally cannot have too much.
Let's have a listen to what Trump had to say about Macron.
Have you invited President Putin to be a member of the Board of Peace?
Yeah, he's been invited.
And do you have any response to President Macron saying he will not join the Board of Peace?
Oh, did he say that? Well,
Yeah.
nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, you know, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
Did you invite?
So there we are, pretty much anything that Macron has to say, and Macron always put himself forward, didn't he, as somebody who could talk to. He was the go-between between Zelensky and Trump at one point, and Macron thought he had some sort of special relationship with America, which turned out to be complete nonsense. And of course, now Trump's just turning around. I mean, very, very simply, isn't it? Give us Greenland. Or we're going to, we're going to have a major problem here. Is that how it works out?
I don't, you shouldn't underestimate Donald Trump. He's not stupid. He didn't get where he is by being stupid. And I still think that there is something that he wants, which is not ownership of Greenland. That's what I think. But and I'm guessing he must be communicating it. That's like I said, what he said cryptically indicates that he wants to cut off that northern sea route, the Northeast Passage, to China, or be able to if he wants to. And he probably wants, he wants the other members of NATO to help with that, basically. So he wants, leasing of long-term leasing of bases in Greenland to allow them to do that. And then probably in other countries, how many bases do they have in Norway? I don't know. If they were going to do that, what would be really useful is to have a base in the Northern Cape area of Norway, right up, by the Arctic Sea, and not necessarily somewhere in Greenland. That would be more useful to them. It would be more useful to them to have an air base on Iceland, for instance.
Give it time, James. Give it time. The problem we've got, of course. And of course, Lavrov's been talking. Now we know that Trump's going to be having a chat at Davos over the next 24 hours. Let's have a little listen to what Lavrov has had to say.
If you read up on the statements by the European politicians, leaders, and Kyles and Ursula von der Leyen, Macron, Starman, Rutte, everyone, they're seriously preparing for the war with the Russian Federation. They're not hiding that fact.
So there he is claiming that. We'll also have a look at a couple of other things Lavrov has had to say.
What we're talking about is that they're members of NATO. And this alliance, right now, is being put to the test. What's its worth? We absolutely have no interest in interfering in anyone's affairs. If we talk about Greenland, well, that's part of the issue that has to do with the consequences of the colonial era. Starting with the 13th century, Greenland essentially was a Norwegian colony. Starting with the 18th, the very beginning of the 20th century, it was the Denmark's colony.
And by the mid-20th century, an agreement was signed according to which it is part of Denmark, not as a colony, but as an associated territory. It was associated with the European Union, but in principle, Greenland is not a natural part of Denmark, is it? It was not a natural part of Norway or Denmark. It was the colonial acquired state. Well, people got used to that.
And there's one other area that I want to cover before we ask you the three questions here.
When the classic use of the international law as the foundation for multilateral relations was substituted by something that is commonly known as a unipolar world, when the United States were leading the Western Bloc, including NATO, essentially decided that the end of history has come, as was declared by Francis Fukuyama in his famous book. They were thinking that no one would stand in the way of Western dominations with all of its theories, liberal, non-liberal, conservative, and so on. So the West was dominating in the world sphere, according to them. When President Putin came to power in the Russian Federation as the outcome of the election in 2000, the situation started to change. Rather, the situation was shifting towards the revision of this very unambiguous Western approach to the world order. And Russia, in the odds with President Putin, started to become aware of its place in the world arena. It started to bring back its identity and started to restore it.
So there we are. So three things there, James. Let's start with the first one here. Greenland, it sounds as though the Russians couldn't care less what happens to Greenland.
Well, maybe not. I mean, he's making the point that, like I said, that Greenland is a colony. I mean, it's an American colony, if you like. It's of Denmark, because it is in the Americas. It's in North America. And then who actually, who discovered it and founded the first colonies? It was Eric the Red. His name was from Iceland.
Yes, he wasn't a nice
those
guy.
Colonies. Well, those colonies died out, and then his son, the legend is his son, Leif Erikson, was the first European to sail to North America. He landed in Canada, what's now Canada, and although some people say St. Brendan, the Irish monk, got there first, but anyway,
So let's dive into the second thing he said then, because it seems quite clear to me that Russia couldn't give a flying stuff whether America annexed Greenland or not. The Lavrov is saying that let's hear from Mark Onza first. Mark Onza.
Warren, I think this Greenland story is generating more than it needs. Let Donald Trump have Greenland if he wants it. Let's be honest. Who cares about it? What value has it got? It's got no value. I'll tell you where the problem is, or what's going off. Let Trump have Greenland. Then you've got Xi Jinping can reclaim Taiwan as part of historical borders, same as Putin can do. Same with Ukraine. Example, when he took a Carlson interview, first thing he did was pull a map out. It's historical borders. Problem with Europe and Starmer, they've had their nose pushed out. They ain't got their finger in anybody's pie. France ain't got a finger in Africa's pie no more, and Starmer's got nothing. So let Trump have it. Let Putin have Ukraine. Xi Jinping, let him have Taiwan. It's part of China anyway, or used to be. And let's just all calm down, for Christ's sake. This Greenland, it's a nothing. It's a nothing.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we've always said that eventually they were going to carve it up between them. This is the post I made for the header, James Tweedy. Let's talk about carving up. And we said this. I don't know. I mean, people might have seen the show many moons ago. We always said if you're not at the table, you're probably going to be. That's the reason. Is because you're on the menu, and it's turned out that way, James Tweedy. I mean, the EU and NATO's a nothing burger now, isn't it? And Mark Onza's right. There's going to be blowback over Taiwan, but nobody can get upset at if China were now to take Taiwan if Trump does this with Greenland.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you know, there's a whole lot of double standards at play. Everyone's been saying, "Oh, we must, you know, we must defend the rules-based order, whatever that is, and international law," which they're not. But you know, about Ukraine, and then now, and then the next thing, the US is is doing what it's doing, right? And then
Yep.
exactly, why shouldn't China, you know, exert control over, exert its sovereignty over Taiwan forcefully, just like take control there.
Just walk it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, what would stop it is force from the US. That's the both parties in the US, both political parties in the US would probably support war with China over that. Even though that would be a very bad idea, really. But they might go for it. They're crazy enough like that. But that's the thing. It's basically might makes right. So exactly.
So
why shouldn't Russia just roll over the rest of Ukraine or something?
So let's get into this then, because this is the point I was sort of trying to nudge the show towards it. Ever since we've had Putin come out and say that that's it, we're done talking with you. This is my interpretation of it, of course. Suddenly they want to talk. Suddenly people are aware that Putin now very much is talking going back to the old NATO borders of 1991, which basically means in Russian speak, for me, James, you may disagree, that Putin's going literally turning around and saying, I'm having all of Ukraine. That's it. I am taking it over. You've had your chances. We've been around the houses over and over and over again. You are not listening. There's no chance of a peace settlement. So let's not have any peace. Let's decide this on the battlefield.
Yeah, but how does that take the NATO? How does that, roll NATO back to Germany? Basically, it doesn't.
Well, it doesn't. But it's a good soundbite to carry on going in Ukraine.
Yeah, I think probably realistically, what they want is that the US, in particular, should not have bases in any of the countries that joined NATO after 1991.
Yep.
In other words, countries that have, a lot of them have borders with Russia.
Yep.
I don't want that. And there's a lot of serious stuff stationed there, like anti-ballistic missiles and early warning radars, and those anti-ballistic missiles could also be used to launch cruise missiles at Russia. And so they want, that's what they want. That's what they were proposing back in 2021. And the answer from the US was to get Ukraine to attack, to get ready for a major offensive in the Donbass. And that's what led to the war, right?
Yeah.
That was the US's answer. And it wasn't Britain and it wasn't France and Germany. It was the US that came up with that, because those negotiations were between Lavrov and Antony Blinken. And so that's what they want. And you can't get that by war, right? There's no military means to get that, assuming that the US in particular is bluffing about support for NATO and would allow Russia to invade the Baltic states and maybe some others, like the whole scaremongering from the European Union says.
Yeah.
Then, okay, if they don't do that, then, if they don't just roll over and let the Russians do that, and France and Britain don't decide not to use their nuclear weapons either, then, or they do decide to use those weapons. If the US doesn't just let Russia do that, then you've got World War III on your hands, and the Russians aren't that stupid, right? They're sensible about it, and it's going to end in a negotiated settlement. And there are going to be people in Russia who say that the settlement gives away too much, or doesn't gain them enough,
Yes.
because they want everything up to the Dnieper River plus Odessa, or something like that. And it won't include that. Probably it won't include that. But what it will maybe achieve is getting US bases out of Eastern Europe. And that's what the Russians want. And this might be an opportunity if, you know, the European members of NATO start talking to Russia. This might be an opportunity because, of course, they could, you know, if they grow a pair, tell the US to get its bases out of their countries.
Hold that thought then, because what I'm going to do is basically play a quick snippet of this. This is way back in 2014 with Victoria Nuland.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, you know, the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to...
That was the original phone call, of course, between Nuland and the US ambassador at the time. Let's have a little listen to a couple of things here. This is Von der Stupid at the World Economic Forum, still banging on.
A package to support Arctic security. First principle, full solidarity with Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. The sovereignty and integrity of their territory is non-negotiable. Second, we're working on a massive European investment surge in Greenland. We will work with Greenland and Denmark hand in hand to see how we can further support the local economy and infrastructure. Third, we will work with the United States and all partners on wider Arctic security. This is clearly in our shared interest, and we will step up our investment. In particular, I believe we should use our defence spending surge on a European icebreaker capability and other equipment vital to the Arctic security.
There we are, James. Ursula von der Leyen, please, please, please don't invade Greenland. We'll give you even more money, and we promise we'll do some economic stuff there and put some weapons in there that we'll buy from you.
I think it's an offer as part of this cryptic negotiation to that they will enforce what the US wants, which is not allowing Chinese cargo ships, you know, tankers and bulk carriers and container ships through, you know, through the Greenland, Iceland Sea and the Greenland Sea and all that, right?
Yeah. And
out into the Atlantic and to trade with them. That's the thing. Now that's a problem because they're also, they do want to trade with China, and Macron said that he wanted more Chinese investment in France. So there's that. Yeah, that's the thing. Okay. What do they want the icebreakers for? This is the thing. Icebreakers are not really a military, you know, they're only like a military technology in the sense that they could open up frozen, you know, they could break sea ice for naval ships to follow them, right?
Yeah.
So what are they going to be for? Are they going to be for opening up the other northern sea route round the north of Canada and, you know, Greenland and Canada and Alaska?
I think we're going to have a new go at
the Chinese. You're coming around this way. You're not going around the Russian way. You're coming around this way. And
I think we're going to have I think we're going to have a new go at the Northwest Passage, and we're going to send a British Franklin type with lots of ships. They're going to get stuck in the ice, and of course they're going to end up trying to sled their way out of there. And then, and of course, when it all turns bad, they're going to start eating each other like they did back in the day. It is quite. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go and have a look at the Northwest Passage with Franklin. Yep.
I was reading about this. If you go up across the north of Greenland, you know, there's a place where the northern coast of Greenland meets the northern coast of Canada, you know, across a narrow channel, right?
Yep.
And that's where there's a, you know, there's a whole dispute, territorial dispute, because there's a kind of sea ridge that cuts the Arctic Ocean in half. It rises from 4,000 meters to 400 meters depth. And Russia and Greenland and Denmark via Greenland and Canada all claim that that's an extension of their continental shelf, and it's their territory. And there's a whole complicated thing going on about that. Anyway, what I was reading about was that there is a sea there, where that ridge, comes into Greenland and the continental shelf of Greenland and Canada. There's a sea there, and the thickest sea ice in the Arctic is there, and sometimes it's up to 15 meters thick, right?
It is,
15 meters thick. And that means you're going to need really, really huge icebreakers like they don't build in Europe or North America. I'm not even sure the really big Russian ones can get 15
it is
meters
thicker
ice.
than than the combined intellect of the EU.
Right. It might not actually be possible to get up there, or the route would have to be different. Let's have a look.
Let's hear from Paul while you're doing that. Paul.
Yeah.
No, Tweedy answered my question because he said the only biggest icebreakers they got is Russian. So you answered my question there, Tweedy. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Yeah, and of course this is going to cause all sorts of problems. Let's while you're having a look at that, James. All of a sudden, the EU and NATO are panicking and they want to have a chat with Russia now. Suddenly they want to start talking after 4 years of not talking at all, because they've realised that they're on the menu. And the problem that we have here is the people that they're putting forward are quite ridiculous. After Ursula von der Leyen, this guy has to be the worst guy put forward.
And if I look at it from a Russian perspective, and if the Russians were honest to themselves, none of their strategic goals have succeeded. What did Putin want? He wanted to take over Ukraine. He made Ukraine European. He wanted to split NATO. He actually got 2 additional members, Sweden and Finland. He wanted to split the transatlantic partnership. Well, someone might say there are cracks in it, but I still believe in the long run hasn't happened. He wanted to split Europe. It's more united than ever. He wanted to keep defense expenditure down. We're now all going to 5%. So, things are not going his way.
The guy is talking like a confounded moron, James.
Look, it's the same thing they've been doing for about 4 years now, that they're projecting ideas of what Russia wants onto Russia, or what they want onto Russia, let's say.
I mean,
like I said, like the idea that Russia, the claim that Russia wants to invade all of Ukraine and annex it is not actually. The Russians have never said that.
No.
So it's a projection.
It is.
And yeah, okay, that's the first one, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of inventing Russian goals that Russia has never stated, and then saying Russia has failed because they haven't reached those goals. Well, they weren't trying to,
We've
right?
now got to the point, haven't we, where the Russians have gone, well, that's a jolly good idea. We'll do that then.
I don't know about that. Like I say, now the question is, like, he claims it as a victory that the NATO countries are all going to be spending 5% of their GDP on defense, which means
that's not a victory.
Either they've got to tax people more, or they've got to cut spending on something else, right?
Yes.
And those other things might be contributing to the economy in a beneficial way, actually. And not, government spending the money is going somewhere. It's being spent on something, and it's going somewhere, and it's employing people. So, and it may be doing some good, like building a lot of roads or something, right? Or railways.
Yeah.
So there's all of that. And yeah, Europe is hurting as well. They've got less money as well. So they've got to spend
and they
more
can't
money
continue
on
to
defense,
war.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Eric Jones. Eric Jones.
Well, where he started off wrong, I believe, was with Ping and Putin both. The art of the deal is okay because it works around the boardroom to say, oh, yeah, we came to a good deal and everything, and the other guy's not going to say anything. Well, they don't like being lied about. And he lied about both of them several times, and they find that highly insulting. They're not like the average European leader. They're not just going to lay down and take that shit, and they don't like that stuff. and he came off as way too brash for them, I believe. And
Yeah.
that's where he started off on the wrong foot.
Yeah. Well, let's hear what Douglas McGregor had to say.
What you started with were very legitimate protests about the economic conditions in Iran. Those overlapped with a struggle, political struggle, between reformers and conservatives. This then was developed into a CIA, Mossad, MI6 operation with the introduction of thousands of these Starlight terminals, enormous quantities of money, which in that setting, of course, is going to buy a certain amount of support. And now we have all sorts of evidence that's being provided overseas as well as here at home for instructions given to people in the crowds to fire on the police and provoke the police to shoot back at them in the hopes that people would be killed. And this then would worsen the situation. Well, all of this unfolded and it failed.
So we've had the failed coup there. I mean, he can't afford not to. He can't afford, and of course we'll get into that in a little while. But he can't afford to take a loss on Greenland here. He's going to push this to its nth degree. How far is he going to push the negotiations, or the possible push of negotiations? Because Vitkov, and obviously they're going to have a chat with the Russians. It's going to go nowhere, though, is it, James? The chat with the Russians, which is just going to literally, with the failure in Iran, that's going to strengthen his position on Greenland, isn't it? Because you've got to have a win somewhere.
Maybe, but that goes again back to what I think he's really trying to achieve, which is not taking over Greenland and then basically having the job of, looking after all the infrastructure in Greenland, which is difficult and expensive. I mean, basically, I suppose it makes a profit in terms of fishing or something. But if there was a lot of oil or gas there, then all the big oil companies would be there already, wouldn't they?
Yes, exactly.
Where is BP and Shell and ExxonMobil? Where are they? They're not there in many places. So there's that. Okay, yeah. I mean, they tried it on like they do every few years in Iran, right? They do this every few years. The last time the pretext was, I think this time, some people are saying that there was basically an attack on the Iranian currency. People were just short selling it. Yep. Right? Whether or not that's true, it was just a pretext for like activating all the agents to kill people. Last time it was some girl died in police custody. Before, a few years ago, it was some other issue. Right?
Well,
they keep doing this every few years, and it's not just about Donald Trump.
Let's give you
they messed it up. Yeah, they didn't work again. Yet again, it didn't work. And it doesn't cost them anything, but it didn't work. But then what else? They're not actually. You look at Venezuela. What's happening in Venezuela? They kidnapped the president and his wife, but now they're negotiating with the government there.
Well, they bought the Rodriguez's, Jorge and Delcy. I mean, they're in the CIA's pocket. I mean, they'll do exactly what they're told. This is why Machado's lost the plot and given a Nobel Peace Prize to Trump, because she's got no chance, because the CIA are very, very happy with what the Rodriguez is doing.
Yeah, but they didn't particularly. It doesn't seem like they had the stomach to invade the country properly, and they only went in to get Maduro, knowing that they wouldn't actually get shot at. Yeah, basically that seems to be the case. And then again, they're making threats against Cuba, and Cuba's even closer. But where is the invasion? They're sailing an aircraft carrier towards Iran, but then I don't think they're going to do anything. And what they did back in the summer in Iran was they dropped some bombs in some places, and then they shut down all debate about all the questions, all the media questions about it. Just said, no, everything was destroyed, and that's that. And and no one's allowed to say any different. You know, so obviously they didn't, right? So they didn't win any victory back then. They had to stop
we called it at the time. We said that no, that hadn't happened, and everybody was saying the same thing. We'll get into a bit more of that in a second. Thank you for watching the first half of the show. We will be having a good deep dive into the Russia situation in the second half, talking about oligarchs and the Rothschilds trying to take over Russia and various other things as well. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome to the second half. Now it is just the subscribers and myself and James. James, we're going to get into some of the things that have gone on in this conflict. We're going to have an update on some of the maps, and just in case you weren't aware, let's start by having a little delve into all the various areas that we're going to be looking at. First one is